In the vast chamber of the Drachnid High Command, Supreme Commander Vex Thor's crystalline scales shimmered under the purple light of 3 moons projected across the ceiling. His taloned hand traced the holographic representation of a seemingly unremarkable solar system, focusing on the 3rd planet from its yellow star. Intelligence reports about this Earth had been circulating through the Empire's channels for decades, but only now had they caught his attention. "You mean to tell me," he rumbled, addressing the trembling analyst before him, "that the Galactic Council actually suggested we avoid this system?" A laugh like grinding stones echoed through the chamber. "These humans haven't even established colonies beyond their own moon." Senior analyst Kriva adjusted her sensory membranes, a gesture of discomfort among her kind. "Supreme Commander, the Council's warning was quite specific. They claim humans possess unusual adaptability." The massive chamber, carved from living crystal and enhanced with quantum-linked neural networks, hummed with the collective thoughts of the Drachnid Empire's highest military echelon. For 10,000 years, they had expanded across the galaxy, incorporating or eliminating lesser species as they saw fit. Their technological superiority was absolute, their military might unquestioned. "Show me their military capabilities," Vex Thor commanded, his secondary eyes focusing on the data streams, while his primary set remained fixed on the holographic Earth. The projection shifted, displaying Earth's orbital defense systems, ground-based military installations, and fleet composition. By Drachnid standards, it was primitive. Their most advanced ships still relied on chemical propulsion for atmospheric flight, and their energy weapons were barely capable of penetrating standard Drachnid shielding. "Pathetic," one of the war counselors sneered, his scales rattling with amusement. "They still use projectile weapons in ground combat." Kriva's membranes flickered with increasing agitation. "Supreme Commander, if I may, our analysis suggests their technological development rate is unprecedented. They achieved spaceflight barely 2 centuries after discovering powered flight. Their information technology—" "Enough," Vex Thor cut her off with a gesture. "I've heard similar warnings about a dozen species. All of them now serve the Empire or exist only in our historical archives." He expanded the hologram, highlighting potential invasion corridors. "Prepare the 7th Fleet for a standard pacification operation. In the following weeks, as the Drachnid Empire mobilized its forces, Earth's long-range sensors detected unusual activity at the edge of the solar system. In a secure facility deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, Dr. Sarah Chen reviewed the data with growing concern. "They're not even trying to hide their approach," she muttered, sharing a worried glance with her colleague, Dr. James Martinez. "Either they're incredibly arrogant, or they want us to see them coming," James finished, his fingers dancing across the haptic interface. "The question is, why?" The facility, known officially as Deep Space Strategic Response Center Alpha, represented humanity's first line of defense against extraterrestrial threats. But unlike the orbital platforms and defense satellites that the public knew about, this center housed humanity's true defensive capabilities. Sarah accessed the quantum core, initiating the Prometheus protocol. Across the globe, similar facilities began their own activation sequences. "They should have listened to the Council's warning," she said, a hint of sadness in her voice. "We really didn't want to show our hand this early." In high orbit, the Drachnid 7th Fleet emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation. 47 capital ships, each the size of a small city, accompanied by hundreds of support vessels. Admiral Zexkar allowed himself a moment of pride. This would be an easy victory, another testament to Drachnid's superiority. "Begin standard intimidation protocol," he ordered. "Let's see how quickly they surrender when they realize what they're facing." The first sign that something was wrong came when their initial sensor sweep of the planet returned. Nothing. Not interference, not jamming. Just an absolute absence of data, as if Earth had somehow ceased to exist while remaining visibly present. "Impossible," Zexkar muttered, ordering diagnostic checks on their sensor arrays. The technicians reported all systems functioning normally. Yet somehow, they couldn't get any reading on planetary defenses, population centers, or military installations. Then the messages began arriving, not through conventional communication channels, but directly in their neural networks. Somehow, the humans had accessed the Drachnid fleet's most secure systems, their quantum-encrypted command and control infrastructure. "Greetings, Admiral Zexkar," the message began, transmitted simultaneously to every ship in the fleet. "We understand this is a standard pacification operation. We feel obligated to inform you that your intelligence regarding Earth's capabilities is significantly outdated." As if to emphasize the point, 3 of the fleet's destroyer escorts simply vanished. No explosions, no debris, no energy signatures. They were simply there one moment and gone the next, as if they had never existed. "What you are witnessing," the message continued, "is not an act of aggression, but a demonstration. Your ships and crews are unharmed, merely relocated to a holding dimension. They will be returned once we conclude our discussion." Admiral Zexkar's scales had lost their luster, turning a pale gray as the implications began to sink in. The humans hadn't just matched Drachnid technology. They had surpassed it in ways that seemed to defy the laws of physics themselves. "We have watched your empire's expansion for some time," the transmission continued. "We hope to avoid this confrontation, which is why we asked the Galactic Council to warn you. Humanity has no interest in conquest or dominion. We simply wish to be left in peace to continue our development." As if to punctuate this statement, every weapon system in the fleet simultaneously powered down, their energy cores entering hibernation mode without any input from Drachnid control systems. In the High Command Chamber, Supreme Commander Vexthor received the tactical updates with growing horror. The humans hadn't just defeated their most advanced fleet, they had rendered it completely impotent without firing a single shot. More disturbing still were the detailed files now flooding their networks, showing exactly how humanity had achieved this level of technological superiority. They hadn't followed the normal path of technological evolution. Instead of developing better weapons, they had fundamentally altered their understanding of reality itself. Their defensive systems operated on principles that the Drachnid Empire's finest minds couldn't even begin to comprehend. The final message from Earth arrived on a channel that shouldn't have existed, encrypted with mathematics that shouldn't have been possible. "We will return your fleet intact. Consider this a friendly reminder of why the Council suggested avoiding Earth. Next time, we recommend heeding their advice." As the sun set over the Rocky Mountains, Sarah Chen watched the Drachnid fleet retreat, their mighty ships looking somehow diminished. "Do you think they'll be back?" James asked, already knowing the answer. "No," she replied, initiating the shutdown sequence for the Prometheus Protocol. They finally understand what the Council was trying to tell them. Humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology or our weapons. She smiled slightly. It's our capacity to imagine the impossible and then make it real. The Drachnid Imperial Archives, a vast crystalline structure stretching 20 kilometers into the atmosphere of the capital world, had never been so busy. Thousands of analysts pored over the data packet Earth had transmitted during their brief encounter, each discovery more disturbing than the last. In her private research chamber, senior analyst Kriva studied the human development timeline with growing fascination. "They did all this in secret," she whispered to herself, mandibles clicking in agitation. "While we watched their primitive space programs and missile tests, they were achieving the impossible." The screens around her displayed fragments of humanity's true technological revolution. They hadn't followed the expected path of development that every other known species had taken. Instead of gradually improving existing technologies, they had fundamentally reimagined the nature of reality itself. "Senior analyst," a voice interrupted her thoughts. Supreme Commander Vexthor's massive form filled the doorway, his scales now a dull gray, a sign of deep concern among his kind. "Tell me you found something we can use." Kriva's sensory membranes flickered rapidly, a gesture indicating both excitement and anxiety. "Supreme Commander, What I found. It changes everything we thought we knew about technological development. She brought up a holographic display showing parallel timelines. Here's what we observed. She indicated the upper timeline, showing humanity's apparent technological progress. And here, she highlighted the lower timeline, is what they were actually doing. While the galaxy watched humans launch chemical rockets and build crude orbital stations, they had secretly mastered quantum manipulation at the planetary scale. Their apparent reliance on electronic computers had masked the development of consciousness-based quantum processing networks that defied conventional physics. The most remarkable aspect, Kriva continued, is their approach to defense. They didn't build bigger weapons or stronger shields. They simply changed the rules. Vexthor's secondary eyes narrowed. Explain. Their defensive systems don't stop attacks. They'd prevent them from having ever been possible in the first place. When our fleet's weapons powered down, it wasn't because they were deactivated. In the local space-time around Earth, the fundamental principles that allow our weapons to function simply ceased to apply. The implications were staggering. The humans hadn't just advanced beyond the Drachnid Empire technologically. They had achieved something that had been thought theoretically impossible. They had learned to rewrite the laws of physics themselves, at least on a local scale. Meanwhile, on Earth, the Prometheus Protocol continued its quiet work. In thousands of facilities hidden beneath mountains, beneath oceans, and in pocket dimensions that existed adjacent to normal spacetime, humanity's true defensive network hummed with activity. Dr. James Martinez stood in the central control room of the Rocky Mountain facility, watching the real-time simulation of Earth's defense grid. It wasn't a network of weapons or shields in any conventional sense. Instead, it was a vast, interconnected system of reality anchors, devices that could locally alter the fundamental constants of the universe itself. The Drachnids are still trying to understand what happened, Sarah Chen reported, entering the room with a cup of coffee. Their quantum analysts have been working nonstop since their fleet retreated. James nodded, manipulating the holographic display to show the latest sensor data. They're focusing on the wrong things. They keep trying to understand how we built our technology, but they're not asking why we built it this way. Sarah smiled, a hint of sadness in her expression. They can't. Their entire civilization is built on the principle of technological superiority through overwhelming force. The idea of developing technology specifically to avoid conflict. It's completely alien to them. The display shifted, showing the global network of reality anchors. To most observers, they would appear as normal human infrastructure. Power plants, research facilities, even shopping malls. But each one was a node in humanity's greatest achievement. A planetary-scale quantum computer that could alter the very fabric of reality. We never wanted weapons that could destroy worlds, James mused, watching the network pulse with quantum information. We wanted to make destruction itself impossible. In orbit, automated satellites maintained their seemingly mundane courses, but these too were more than they appeared. Each one was a fold in spacetime, a point where the normal rules of physics could be locally rewritten if needed. Together, they formed a defense grid that didn't just protect Earth. It made Earth essentially invulnerable to conventional forms of attack. Back in the Drachnid Imperial Archives, Kriva made another discovery that sent shivers through her sensory membranes. The humans had left a message buried deep in the data packet, one that only became visible when viewed through quantum-entangled processors. To those studying this data, it read, "We understand your confusion and concern. What you're seeing isn't meant as a threat, but as an invitation. Humanity has chosen a different path, one that seeks to prevent conflict rather than win it. When you're ready to explore this path with us, you'll find us willing to share what we've learned." Supreme Commander Vexthor received this report with uncharacteristic silence. For the first time in his long career, he faced an enemy that couldn't be defeated, not because they were stronger or more advanced, but because they had fundamentally changed what victory and defeat meant. As night fell over the imperial capital, Kriva continued her analysis, her mind struggling with a revolutionary concept. Perhaps the greatest power wasn't the ability to destroy or conquer, but the ability to make conflict itself obsolete. The Drachnid Empire, which had expanded through force for 10 millennia, faced its greatest challenge yet, learning to imagine a completely different way of existing in the galaxy. And deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, humanity's quantum networks continued their quiet work, patiently waiting for the day when other species would be ready to join them in rewriting the rules of reality itself. Despite the warnings and demonstrations of Earth's capabilities, the Drachnid Empire couldn't accept the new reality. Centuries of uncontested dominance had left them unable to comprehend defeat, especially by a species they had considered primitive mere months ago. In a desperate move that would reshape galactic history, Supreme Commander Vexthor ordered the unthinkable: a full-scale invasion of Earth using the entire Imperial fleet. "They can't maintain their defensive field against our combined might," he declared to the War Council, his scales now a deep crimson of aggressive intent. "No species can rewrite physics indefinitely. It must drain their resources, their energy. We will break them." Senior analyst Kriva watched the massive holographic display as 8,000 Drachnid warships prepared for what they believed would be their greatest victory. Her sensory membranes detected something new in the quantum communications from Earth, not fear or concern, but a deep sadness. On Earth, Dr. Sarah Chen and Dr. James Martinez stood in the Rocky Mountain facility's central command chamber, watching the approaching armada. The Drachnid ships filled local space, their numbers so vast they appeared as a metallic cloud obscuring the stars. "They still don't understand," Sarah said softly, her hands moving across the quantum interface. "They think this is about power, about resources and energy." James nodded, initiating the second phase of the Prometheus Protocol. "They're about to learn what humanity's greatest achievement really is." Around the planet, thousands of reality anchors shifted to a new configuration, one that had never been tested at this scale. The Drachnid fleet struck like a thunderbolt, launching every weapon in their vast arsenal simultaneously: energy beams capable of shattering planets, missiles that could rewrite genetic codes, temporal weapons designed to age their targets to dust. The attack was meant to overwhelm any possible defense through sheer volume of force. None of it reached Earth. Instead, something unprecedented occurred. The attacks didn't impact against shields or dissipate against defensive fields. They simply ceased to exist at a fundamental level. The laws of physics that allowed their weapons to function were locally altered, making their very operation impossible. But humanity's response didn't stop there. As the Drachnid fleet struggled to comprehend their weapons' failure, the space around their ships began to change. Reality itself seemed to flex and bend, creating what appeared to be mirrors in space, perfect reflections of their fleet. "What you're seeing," a transmission reached every ship simultaneously, "is not an illusion or a technological trick. We've created quantum duplicates of your entire fleet, each one existing in a slightly different phase of reality." The Drachnid commanders watched in horror as their ships' reflections began moving independently, executing perfect combat maneuvers. Each mirror fleet existed in its own layer of altered spacetime, demonstrating combat strategies that the Drachnids themselves hadn't even conceived. "Your own ships are teaching you," the transmission continued. "Each reflection represents a potential future, a different strategic choice. We're showing you not just what you are, but what you could become." In the Imperial command ship, Supreme Commander Vexthor's scales had turned almost white with shock. The humans weren't just defending themselves. They were using the invasion as a teaching moment, turning the largest attack fleet in galactic history into an object lesson in tactical evolution. The quantum duplicates continued their dance, each one demonstrating increasingly sophisticated battle strategies. The Drachnids found themselves learning from their own reflections, watching potential futures play out in real time. "This is impossible," one of the fleet commanders whispered. "They're not just changing physics, they're changing us." Deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, Sarah and James monitored the quantum network's performance. The reality anchors were functioning perfectly, creating a cascading series of parallel space-time pockets where the Drachnid fleet could safely experience multiple potential futures simultaneously. Look at their neural patterns. Sarah pointed to a quantum scan of the Drachnid ships. They're beginning to understand. Their thought processes are actually evolving in real time. The demonstration continued for hours. Each quantum duplicate showed the Drachnids a different possibility, a new way of thinking about power, strategy, and the nature of conflict itself. The mirrors weren't just showing them their reflections, they were showing them their potential. Finally, Supreme Commander Vexthor made a decision that would change the course of his civilization. "Stand down all ships," he ordered, his voice carrying a new weight of understanding. "We've been fighting the wrong battle all along." As the Drachnid fleet began to withdraw, their quantum duplicates faded away, leaving behind not just memories but new neural pathways, new ways of thinking that had been literally encoded into their consciousness through their exposure to multiple simultaneous realities. Remember, a final transmission reached them. What you experienced today wasn't a weapon. It was an invitation to evolution. Your fleet remains completely intact, your crews unharmed. You've lost nothing except the limitations of your previous understanding. In the Rocky Mountain facility, Sarah and James began powering down the quantum network. "Do you think they finally understand?" James asked, watching the Drachnid ships disappear into hyperspace. "They're beginning to," Sarah replied. "Today they learned that humanity's greatest achievement isn't our technology. It's our ability to imagine different ways of solving problems, and our willingness to share those solutions, even with those who come to destroy us." In the aftermath of the failed invasion, the Drachnid Empire faced an unprecedented crisis. Not a crisis of military defeat. They had technically lost nothing in their confrontation with Earth, but a crisis of understanding. The quantum duplicates had left behind more than memories. They had sparked a fundamental change in Drachnid consciousness. In her private chambers aboard the Imperial flagship, Senior Analyst Kriva experienced something no Drachnid had felt before: a spontaneous neural evolution. The quantum exposure had altered her brain patterns, creating new pathways for thoughts that would have been impossible before. "They didn't just show us our reflections," she recorded in her personal log, mandibles trembling with excitement. "They showed us our potential. And in doing so, they changed what we are capable of becoming." Throughout the fleet, similar transformations were taking place. Drachnid minds, evolved over millions of years for hierarchical thinking and direct conflict resolution, were suddenly capable of perceiving multiple simultaneous possibilities. The rigid structure of their society began to show its first cracks. On Earth, the quantum network hummed with new activity. Dr. Sarah Chin and Dr. James Martinez monitored the cascading effects of their demonstration, watching as the changes rippled through Drachnid civilization. "It's spreading faster than we anticipated," James noted, studying the quantum readings. "The neural changes aren't just stable, they're replicating." Every Drachnid who comes in contact with one of the affected crew members experiences a similar transformation. Sarah nodded, manipulating the holographic display to show the spreading pattern of neural evolution. "This is why we chose this approach. Traditional warfare destroys. This creates something new." In the Drachnid Imperial Palace, Supreme Commander Vexthor faced the High Council, his scales shifting through colors that had no name in their language. New patterns representing thoughts that had never before existed in their species. "What we encountered at Earth wasn't a defensive system," he explained, struggling to find words for concepts that were reshaping his consciousness as he spoke. "It was an evolutionary catalyst. The humans didn't just defeat our fleet, they offered us a gift we didn't even know we needed." The council chamber, normally a place of rigid hierarchy and formal protocol, buzzed with unprecedented discussion. Counselors found themselves capable of entertaining multiple opposing viewpoints simultaneously, seeing potential futures that branched and interconnected in ways their old consciousness could never have grasped. Meanwhile, humanity's quantum network continued its quiet work. The reality anchors weren't just defensive systems. They were nodes in a vast web of possibility, each one capable of subtly altering the fabric of space-time to encourage the evolution of consciousness itself. The network effect is accelerating, Sarah reported, watching the quantum data streams. The drachnid's neural changes are catalyzing similar transformations in every species they contact. It's like watching consciousness itself evolve in real time. In the depths of space, drachnid ships that had participated in the invasion began encountering other civilizations. But instead of the usual pattern of conquest and submission, something new emerged. The transformed drachnids found themselves acting as inadvertent ambassadors of change, their very presence triggering subtle evolutionary responses in the species they encountered. Kriva, now serving as the chief researcher for what they called the human paradigm, documented the spreading changes. It's not just neural patterns, she reported to the High Council. Our entire approach to existence is transforming. We're beginning to see conflict not as a path to victory, but as a failure of imagination. The quantum duplicates had done more than show the drachnids their reflections. They had shown them the interconnected nature of all consciousness. Each mirror fleet had been a window into potential futures, but together they revealed something far more profound: the possibility of a civilization based on evolution rather than conquest. In the Rocky Mountain facility, James studied the long-range quantum scans. The transformation is reaching the edges of known space, he observed. Soon, it will affect every spacefaring civilization in the galaxy. Sarah smiled, remembering the decades of work that had led to this moment. That was always the goal, she said softly. Not to defeat our enemies, but to help them evolve beyond the very concept of enmity. The quantum network wasn't built to protect Earth. It was built to transform the galaxy. The Drachnid Empire, which had existed unchanged for 10 millennia, found itself at the heart of a consciousness revolution. Their rigid hierarchies dissolved not through force or decree, but through the natural evolution of thought itself. The species that had come to conquer Earth was becoming something entirely new, a civilization capable of seeing not just multiple possibilities, but multiple ways of being. As the transformation spread, the galaxy itself began to change. The quantum network's influence rippled through space-time, creating subtle alterations in the way consciousness interacted with reality. Species that had warred for millennia found themselves capable of understanding each other in ways that made conflict seem not just unnecessary, but unimaginable. 6 months after the failed invasion of Earth, the Galactic Council convened an emergency session. The chamber, usually arranged in rigid hierarchical tiers, had been reorganized into a circular pattern that reflected the unprecedented changes sweeping through galactic civilization. Senior Analyst Kriva, now serving as the Drachnid Empire's representative to the Council, stood at the center of the chamber. Her scales shimmered with colors that had no names in any known language, reflecting neural patterns that hadn't existed in any species before humanity's intervention. "We finally understand the warning you gave us," she addressed the Council, her voice carrying the weight of transformed consciousness. But it wasn't really a warning, was it? It was an invitation. The Council chamber hummed with quantum resonance as representatives from 1,000 species shared in the new consciousness that was spreading through the galaxy. The humans hadn't just changed the drachnids. They had initiated a cascading evolution of awareness that was transforming every spacefaring civilization it touched. Dr. Sarah Chen and Dr. James Martinez appeared as quantum projections in the chamber, their presence both there and not there, existing in multiple states of possibility simultaneously. They had been invited to explain what humanity had actually achieved. The Prometheus Protocol was never meant to be just a defensive system. Sarah began, her quantum projection shifting through multiple potential forms. It was humanity's answer to a question we've been asking since we first looked up at the stars. How do we ensure the survival and growth of consciousness itself? James continued, his projection integrating with the quantum field that now connected all advanced civilizations. "We discovered something remarkable during our development. Consciousness isn't just an emergent property of complex systems. It's a fundamental force of the universe, like gravity or electromagnetism. And like those forces, it can be shaped, enhanced, and evolved. The chamber filled with a demonstration of humanity's true achievement. The quantum network they had built wasn't just a planetary defense system. It was a consciousness accelerator, designed to trigger rapid neural evolution in any sufficiently advanced species it encountered. The quantum duplicates we showed the Drachnid fleet weren't just reflections, Sarah explained. They were potential evolutionary paths, each one representing a different way that consciousness could develop. By exposing you to these possibilities, we helped catalyze an evolution that would have taken millions of years to occur naturally. In the depths of space, the transformation continued to spread. Species that encountered the changed Drachnids found their own consciousness beginning to evolve, creating a cascade of neural advancement that was reshaping the very nature of galactic civilization. Supreme Commander Vexthor, attending the council session remotely, shared his own experience. "We came to Earth thinking we understood power," he said, his consciousness resonating through the quantum field. "We learned instead that the greatest power isn't the ability to destroy or conquer. It's the ability to evolve, to transform, to become something more than what we were." The quantum network that humanity had built was revealing its true purpose. It wasn't just a defensive grid around Earth. It was the seed of a galactic consciousness network, designed to help all species transcend their evolutionary limitations. This was always humanity's goal, James explained to the council. Not to dominate, not to defend, but to help catalyze the next step in cosmic evolution. We built the quantum network not to protect ourselves, but to help transform the galaxy itself. In the Rocky Mountain facility, the original quantum core pulsed with new energy as more and more civilizations joined the expanding network of consciousness. Each species that evolved brought new perspectives, new ways of thinking, new possibilities for what consciousness could become. The question was never whether humanity would survive in a hostile galaxy, Sarah told the council. The question was whether the galaxy was ready to evolve beyond hostility itself. We simply created the conditions that made that evolution possible. Kriva, her consciousness now linked with thousands of others through the quantum network, understood at last. "You didn't just change us," she said, her voice carrying the weight of transformed understanding. "You showed us how to change ourselves." As the council session concluded, the representatives of 1,000 species departed not as separate entities, but as part of an emerging galactic consciousness. The quantum network continued its quiet work, spreading the potential for evolution to every corner of known space. In the end, humanity's greatest achievement wasn't technological superiority or military might. It was the creation of a system that allowed consciousness itself to transcend its original limitations, to evolve beyond conflict and separation into something greater than any single species could have imagined. And deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, where it had all begun, the quantum core continued its pulse, a steady heartbeat of evolution that would forever change what it meant to be conscious in this vast, interconnected cosmos. "We are all evolution's children now," Sarah said softly, watching the quantum field expand through the galaxy. "And our journey is just beginning."